Doug? Hope you're going to be able to make the board meeting in 7 or 8 minutes from now, period. Just a note to Marilyn. Sorry, this is such a long wait. If people check in early, it's always nice to visit. I did hear. Hi.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Doug. I'm Sue.
Hi, Doug.
Hi, Sue.
Where are you at now, Doug?
I'm in the charming little city of Sète, France.
Sept, how do you spell that?
Sete, and the first E has not a, what do you call it? A accent, but the opposite accent.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
So but I don't know why. I don't speak French. Do you, either one of you?
no.
No.
Yeah. Anyway, it's Sete. Yeah, and I took a train about 3 hours west from Marseille, so it's still on the coast. And in fact, they call this the. I'll have to send you both a photo of the water boat, kids on boats in jousting,
Oh,
literally using jousting poles. You know,
well,
instead
it's
of
been a good trip.
yeah. Yeah,
Good.
yeah. I'm about done. If
So
I,
are you going to be staying at Jean's house?
well, I haven't talked to her.
I think she's last week talked about it. She's expecting you.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, I've just been giving her space to, not be confronted with me asking her because I didn't know whether. Yeah, so I'm glad to hear that. Really.
Yeah,
Yes.
she's doing well. Patrick's still there and he'll be there till the 28th, I think. And then it might be a little more difficult, but she's doing okay and she could use a little help around there.
All right, well, good. I can provide some.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that. I had thought to ask you what you thought, whether I should,
You should be in touch, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay. But what is the best number to call her on? I think I saw a note from you somewhere that to not use one number, one
Let me
certain
get
number.
my phone, just a sec.
Yeah, because I.
Hi, Dick, and hi, Cindy. We'll wait a couple more minutes here for Justin, and then I'll send him a text or call him.
How are things in Spokane now?
I would say they're pretty good. I'd like to monitor the smoke level, and the highest I've seen in the last 2 or 3 days is about 70, a rating of 70 on that 2.5 parts per million. I haven't checked it today, but as I look towards some hills in the distance, it looks pretty clear.
Last night I checked because I was getting quite an orange sunset looking west. And it was moderate, but today seems better.
Hmm.
Yeah. Doug, can I give you her number?
Yes.
Okay, it's 509-448-2631. And that's her cell number, her landline. They don't use that.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, I'm calling Justin now.
Hi, Tom. I'm in the middle of a computer crisis. Computer's locked up. I've got some brand new software on my computer I did not install.
Huh.
Every time I try to log into Zoom, not only can I not log in, it locks the computer up completely.
Can he do it on his phone?
Yeah, can you join us on the
Okay, I have no idea how to do that, but I'll try.
yeah, there should be a link in that. If you can open any email, the email that we got from yesterday with the communications might have a link, or if someone else can help us out here.
Yes, that's the one I used. I'm gonna call Luba.
Okay, I'm gonna hold up the meeting while I'll try to find that link and try to log in. I've something up here, instead of having Zoom, I have Zoom Workplace, which now has AI Assist, which I never installed or ordered.
Oh,
It showed up when I click on Zoom, and that's what comes up. I'll try looking through my emails, finding the link and try to do it that way.
okay. Well, we've got 5 board members, so we could conduct business. Sue is calling Luba, so join us when and if you can.
She will be here. I think she forgot a little bit, but she's.
Now, And now, actually, Justin, I'm using Zoom Workplace. That's what's at the top of my screen.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was just gonna say that's what popped up for me as well.
Yeah, same here. Mhm.
Everybody's got Zoom Workplace, so if you click on that link that came with the communications, that should take you there unless your computer is confused by whatever issue you're dealing with.
Yeah, when I click on it, nothing happens.
Huh.
Once it installs, no buttons respond. I'm in my third boot up now.
Okay, all right, so long.
Bye-bye.
Hmm.
There she is.
Now,
Hey, Luba.
Charming little.
Well, Luba, I liked your sermon. Mhm. Your life story.
Okay, well, we've got 6 of us here. Nancy Avery said she would not be able to join us. Of course, she's not formally a board member, but and hi, Lynn. So we have 6. So let's jump off there. Hi, Luba. So calling to order at about 4:04. The first thing is is there any adjustments to the agenda that the board members received? Okay, seeing none, the agenda as was circulated is approved. And then next thing on the agenda is to approve or change or amend the minutes, which we all should have received. The trustees should have received that. Any comments about changing or additions to the minutes that we were last circulated? I think it was version 4. Okay, seeing none, the minutes as circulated and will be approved. Now we're down to something that we should do in June because new officers are supposed to take place in July, the beginning of the fiscal year. So do we have anyone stepping forward for any of those 4 offices? And I will say that I did receive an inquiry from Nancy inquiring about what were the responsibilities of the vice president. And I sent her the bylaws that address that and the executive committee, since vice president ex officio serves on the executive committee. So we have anybody stepping forward here?
Well, I'm stepping forward just slightly under duress to put myself forward as president. Nancy and I had a conversation, and she has served on the board before, sometime in the past. And as you know, this is my first time around on the board. And I told her I would really appreciate it if we could think of it as almost a co-presidency. Because without some strong support from the other board members, I wouldn't be up for it. And she assured me that she was willing to step up and work hard, and I would imagine the rest of you will chime in as well. So here I am.
It seems like we should do this by motion, that we have a motion to elect Cindy as president, and based on the conversation that we just had, let's go ahead. Is there a second for that?
I second.
Second, those in favor, please indicate by signaling in favor or approval.
Mhm.
Okay, hi, Justin. Yeah, so we unanimously have elected Cindy as president, and I, of course, will be involved with a transition to the point I can be helpful. And since we've heard verbally and by email inquiry from Nancy, can I have a motion to nominate Nancy for vice president, unless when she returns, she's violently objects to it.
I have put some motion for Nancy as vice president for the next year on the board.
I
Second.
seconded.
Okay, is there any conversation? Discussion? Okay, those in favor of Nancy Avery being elected to the office of vice president? Okay, I see that as unanimous. Anybody who is going to step forward to be secretary, which is mostly a token position as long as we have a recording secretary. And I've not heard anything negative from Marilyn Johnson that she will not continue as recording secretary. And so there's a formality of being secretary. And we have to register a secretary. So you were the last secretary, Cindy. Was it an overly burdensome job?
Not at all.
Yeah. Well, I talked to Cindy, and as I understand, the suggestion was for me to do the dual role, being the board liaison, communicating with Rebecca on BoT's behalf. Did I understand that correctly?
It's, that's part of the secretary role, really.
Part of the secretary. So, but what would be the name for that dual role?
Secretary.
Not liaison?
I see liaison as a responsibility within the secretary role. I don't know. What would you say, Tom?
Well, actually, the secretary is an elected officer and has to be registered with the state. And the bylaws actually say that we would appoint a board liaison. So there's nothing that says they can't be a dual role. So you'd be doing the same thing you have been doing, which is going to the ops team meetings and then reporting back to the board, and then also filling the role of forwarding, board actions to the operations manager, which sometimes I guess you meet in person. Is that not the case, Cindy?
I have, yes.
Yeah, Cindy explained to me, and usually it sounds, well, for me, not quite understandable. I'm willing to try, provided that Cindy will be leading me at the beginning.
You bet.
Okay. So actually, the only formal thing here is you would be stepping forward to be the official secretary, and then we can deal with the liaison. I'm actually scanning the board to see if there's an official thing about appointing a board liaison. That's what we've done in the past, so let's just assume that would be something that would be very, very handy because we need feedback to the board from the operations team and the operations manager. So is there a motion to appoint or elect Luba as secretary?
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, I see seconds, so those in favor. Somehow I lost Sue. I'm not, what am I missing here? But anyway, those in favor indicate by aye. Okay, we have, are you voting in favor of yourself, Luba?
Am I?
Yes. So, okay, we have 6 since I can't see Sue at this point on my,
Appreciate it.
I'm sorry, I had to walk away. What was it?
we were voting on Luba as secretary and those in favor. Okay, we have a unanimous in support of Luba as secretary. And then we need to at this point, fill the position of treasurer. So anybody wanting to step forward for the treasurer, realizing Dick has served for 2 years. So
I nominate Justin.
Yeah. Yeah, I might say that it's sort of reduced to sort of me just relaying some things I get from Rebecca. If there's someone else who could do more in the way of real financial work in the congregation, that would be actually a better role for treasurer. Yeah.
well, it's okay. So do we have a nomination for Justin?
How do you feel about that, Justin?
We can't.
You're muted, Justin.
Muted.
I decline absolutely and irrevocably.
Okay, do we have another person that would step forward?
I could continue my limited role, but if someone else wants to take a more active role, that would be quite reasonable.
Okay, we can, well, if you're stepping forward, is there a formal nomination for Dick to continue as the treasurer until any other arrangements might be worked out?
I nominate Dick for treasurer.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
Okay, it's been seconded. So those in favor of Dick Burkhart being elected as the treasurer indicate by favorable. I'm seeing unanimous on that.
Thank you,
Assuming-
Dick.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, at
Okay.
least after a couple of years, I got some feel for how things run here
Yeah.
anyway. But again, I can't really dig in as well as some people on site might be able to.
Yeah, well, that's something the next board may have to deal with because in the past there was a discussion about an appointed trustee treasurer and that the next board, if they choose to, could pursue that. But anyway, we've elected officers. Let me make something going on here with my phone. Let me make sure. Okay, so now we have to decide on what we would do for meetings. Nancy Avery responded that the meetings we were previously using 4 o'clock for each of the exec committee meetings on the, unless otherwise adjusted, on the third Wednesday of the month, and the board on the fourth Wednesday of the month at 4 o'clock, our, Pacific time. Is that workable for everybody? Except as we may adjust because of holidays or some other reason.
Tom, that's continuing the schedule we have now, right? That
Yes.
worked for Nancy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is that agreeable to all?
Why don't we just raise our hands, and those who are happy with that schedule, just raise your hands. Would that be acceptable?
Yeah,
acceptable.
okay. I assume it's okay with you, Sue?
I won't be here, so.
You're not on the board. Okay, so we have everybody agreeing to that, and that would be the president and the vice president, so that'd be Cindy and Nancy, and then a floating person for the third person. And when Todd comes back on board in August, then Todd is an ex officio member of the executive committee. And the primary responsibility, as you all know, is setting the agenda. But if the board chooses to, it could assign the executive committee something, some other tasks also. That hasn't happened to my knowledge recently, but could be. So we're at the same schedule. Now, we do need a floating trustee for the that meeting, and I would volunteer to be that person because I might be able to be helpful in that first meeting with regard to just trying to get things up and running. Is
Good.
that okay with everybody?
Yep.
Okay, so I would be the float. Then, of course, on the agenda, we have a minister's update report, and of course, he's not with us by his choice since he's on sabbatical. So number 7 is my report. And 7.1, I did sign and gave official notice and a copy of my signed official action to Rebecca, so it would be recorded and let the other people know whether she puts it in the Sun or not, I'm not sure. But anyway, it's been done according to the direction from the annual meeting. GA, number 7.2, I participated in all the votes that I were aware of, using my own justice and feeling, but I don't have a follow-up as to the conclusion. Do you have anything to add to the conclusion of Dick, of the GA that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, much of it happened as expected. Like the big thing was the co-moderators and Bill Young and I think what's her name, Kimberly Johnson, I think. Or
Yeah,
Johnson.
John.
Yeah, and they were elected as co-moderators with Natasha Walker, and getting 25% of the vote. They got 75%, and I agree with that. The couple were much more experience, although Natasha Walker had some interesting ideas, but she didn't really have that much experience either. So I think that came out fairly reasonable. Then we started out with what was it? Was it 5 or 6 actions of immediate witness, and that was narrowed down by a vote to just 3. And that vote was by all the delegates. You had to choose one, and the top 3 were the result that were sent to the General Assembly for 2/3 vote validation. It's kind of strange because almost always if it gets into the top 3, they're validated by 98% or something like that. And the big issue is choosing among the top 3. And I expect when they redo the bylaws, there'll be some revisions. And one of the things I'll propose is that there be something like a ranked choice voting for the top 3 that go on, and that would be much better. In fact, maybe that could just be it right there. I mean, why have all this extra stuff in the General Assembly, which doesn't really add anything? So I'm going to propose, I think, but this will be in the future, a top 3 kind of ranked kind of voting with much more extensive discussions than there were this time that involved delegates in a much better way. Because usually there have been mini assemblies, which didn't really happen this time. But
Well,
that's for the future.
Can you explain or identify the 3 that were chosen, and then
Yeah,
how were they handled in the General Assembly or in the, you know, the overall assembly?
Yeah, so there was one on immigration. I think that got the top ranking among the early vote by the delegates, which mostly happened during the prior 3 weeks or so online. And then there was, and that was a fairly good one, I thought. Although some people thought it, a few people I know thought it assumed open borders, but I didn't interpret it that way. I thought it was fairly reasonable. And then there's another on, you might just call it being faithful to our democracy, looking sort of indirectly what Trump has been doing, but not directly. And that was very well done. That was put together by, I think, Reverend Fred Dusen from the Concord, Massachusetts church. I highly respect him. And then the third one that passed was on funding for LGBTQ programs which have lost funding, especially overseas programs. And that was okay with me.
Yeah.
But although I didn't think that was maybe the biggest issue, the one that did not get into the top 3, which I thought was important, was Washington D.C. statehood. That's been a perennial thing, and maybe that's why people didn't vote as AIW, but it's a good time to look at it because there are a lot of people in DC itself who don't feel well represented. In fact, they're just represented by whoever has the majority in Congress. And when it comes down to the final analysis, I mean, they have the veto of everything.
Yeah,
and I think it was the minister of the was it Ranamanchi? Kind of, I forget the minister's name. Man from India is the minister of a big church in DC. Put that together, and I know him well, so that was a good one.
yeah, I voted for the same 3 also. But now, what happens since those were voted and they go to the whole assembly? Then does the assembly verify or adopt them, or what happens to these 3?
Well,
These 3
yeah.
top.
Well, see, they go to the whole assembly. And it's kind of observed that on the first day on Thursday, there's a vote to admit them to the agenda.
Okay.
And there's some debate there. And then once they've been admitted to the agenda, the next day, Friday, there's a vote to pass them, which requires 2/3. And say they want way more than 2/3. So it's a pretty, that's why I say I'm proposing that, I'll be proposing, and I think the bylaws committee will change that in the future to make it a little more rational. So that there'd be some there should be some debate in General Assembly, but a lot more beforehand too, and certainly not twice in the General Assembly. It's good.
Okay, well, we were eligible for 5 delegates and we had only 2 of us, and I think we voted very, very similarly, although we didn't collaborate.
Yeah, the bigger issue was actually on the CSAIs. There were 3 proposals for congressional study action issues. Um, and the one I had favored was by Bob Murphy. I know he works with our UUJC board a lot, based in Florida, on housing. Affordable housing is a real crisis in this country right now. And that was put together fairly well. Bob is not too good at writing these things, but it still came across fairly well.
Okay,
And then the other 2, though, one was on abolition, which is kind of it turned out they were talking about abolition of prisons, which I was not too happy with that, because that's a kind of a revolutionary word. It reminded me of defund the police. It's not the kind of thing, it's the kind of thing that polarizes the country and doesn't find common ground. And so that was totally, and that's the one that ended up passing, but it was totally expressed in terms of what I would call woke ideology. Yeah, like a study action issue is supposed to study an issue, and they put that in there in this kind of revolutionary terms and said, well, we will abolish the prisons and all kinds of stuff. And they expanded it to abolish some things like reasonable ICE and whatever else. But it was very radical kind of language. And I thought that, and nothing about actual actions. Like in prisons, there's been a long history of UUs helping to promote good education and training or rehabilitation in prisons. Another issue is what they call restorative justice or community service, things like that. And there's been a lot of progress on those. Another simply is legal reform, so fewer people end up in prison, maybe for minor drug offenses and things like that. And so progress has been made in all those, and none of those things were even mentioned in the CSAI itself, in the wording. And I made some rather pointed comments about that in the online discussion group, for which I was censored. My comments, I think, were a little too pointed, because I said this was just like an exercise in woke ideology, and I cited some of the things I just said, that we should study these, but build on that and formulate a plan of action. And the final day where they actually voted on the CSAI, the prime proposer actually did add in his 2-minute speech some of the things I talked about, some of the practical things. So I think I did have an effect there. But you know, the kind of woke ideology, revolutionary stuff doesn't really help as far as I'm concerned. It actually hurts us and helped to let Donald Trump. And the other one had some of the same characteristics. It was about fat liberation. And the basic goals are to remove the stigmatization, discrimination against people who are overweight. But again, it was totally done in terms of woke ideology, kind of a moral crusade kind of thing. And I pointed out in my comments that, well, no, there's some science that we have to consider here too, the medical science of people being overweight and obesity, and what's the cause and effect. And there are a lot of controversies actually in obesity. What's how much is obesity the cause of diabetes or effect, and that kind of thing. And of course, there are quite a few people who are overweight without real medical issues, and I thought those should be included and sorted out. But apparently there's some, and they describe themselves as fat people. Even our president, Sophia Bettencourt, and several other people who are maybe a little overweight describe themselves as fat. And apparently some of these people have been told by their doctors to reduce weight or suggested that, and they got angry at the medical establishment, you know.
okay. Well, thanks for that summary. And if or you, Dick, if we get a kind of a summary of the GA for 2025, and we can forward it out to
Yeah, I can write that. And also on the fat liberation thing, the board, UA board last fall, I think it was, or last year sometime, adopted a motion sort of basically supporting the UUA itself and supporting the fat liberation group as an identity group. But again, to me, I don't like that way of doing things, because it's so ideological rather than practical.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
that's sort of the summary.
thank you.
uh,
And if you do write something up, we can suggest it be put in the Sun with a link to the summary so that others could get it.
Oh,
So,
one more thing I forgot too. After the GA, I think just yesterday, I got an email from Charles Dumont. I can maybe send that out to you guys. And he was the co-moderator, so he's no longer the co-moderator. So he sent me a final email because I've emailed the board, including him, back and forth on a number of issues, like the one with Todd Eckloff. And so he finally sent me an email where he sort of laid out his own positions on these things. He wasn't being so diplomatic, and but it's clear to me why he was chosen as board president. Really, well, not CEO of the board. Moderator is what it is. He's fairly competent as CEO, but he's totally bought into the woke ideology, and he thought Todd Eckloff had caused harm and deserved what he got. That's
okay,
basically what he said.
we need to move on, Dick, because we're getting
Yeah.
short on time. So thank you.
But that means that the woke stuff is still alive. It's not as prominent, but it's still definitely very much alive.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, the next item here on the agenda was just a report to the board, not to discuss it at this time, but after the annual meeting, I went to the total annual report for the church, and I reviewed the board's report, which had been agreed to by the board and submitted. And it was pretty severely edited, and you all have received copies of that. And if we want to discuss any action to take regarding that, we can do that it's under another item of business. Then also I did, some of you are aware, most of you are aware that I volunteered a few months ago to have a $1,500 that they could use as an incentive, and about $450 to $480 of that is used to match some of the money that was collected during the annual generosity kickoff luncheon. And I let Rebecca know that it could be used for any incentive that the operations team or this fairly new team committee to try to enhance the income, that it could be used for those purposes. And that I'd like to, at the end of the fiscal year, I'd like to know how much I do owe, how much of it's been used. So that took place. And then I also sent a message to Rebecca saying at some point we're going to have the 5-year strategic plan probably and the ministerial agreement. And she responded back, the 5-year strategic plan is in our dark blue binder that most of us have already received. And she's preparing a new binder for Nancy Avery. And she said that when we get to the topic of reviewing the ministerial agreement, that we then could receive copies of that. But other than that, that agreement isn't available. It's considered a personnel matter. And I don't have any other item to throw out, so we could move to item 8, which is the ops team report submitted by Luba, which you have. And Luba, if you would just summarize that, and it will be attached to the minutes.
Yeah, with the budget passed during the annual meeting, the focus of the ops team is on day-to-day operation. The goal was condensing the church's website from 80 pages as it is now to a recommended 10 is really, really tough. Rebecca said the new website is slated for July. And her business report, she emphasized ongoing problem with online accounting software. She spends much time comparing new books with the previous ones, fixing the errors in the data imported by the bookkeeper. And she stressed, pointed out that it is important to find a solution in regards with the bookkeeping and the payroll transactions. Apart from finding new appliances for the church, it's also important to clean the kitchen, she said, especially if the church is going to rent it to the food trucks. That may help to increase fundraising. Since the church cannot expect huge pledges from the members, we need more fundraising events, for example, renting the church for weddings. That's it.
Okay, was there any indication that this new committee or team is going to be taking on some of these additional fundraising things? Was that any conversation?
No, no.
Okay. In that general area, any comments about that report? I see you, Justin.
Yeah, you said about the bookkeeping software, you said new books or was that QuickBooks?
QuickBooks.
And
Thank
I
you.
think I think she said it's an online version of QuickBooks versus
Yeah,
in-house version, even though they're both QuickBooks. I guess the online version is quite a bit
yes,
different.
online version of QuickBooks. Yes,
Yeah,
this is how she called new books. I'm not sure that I should call them new books, but online version of QuickBooks.
which seems strange, but I've seen the same thing happen in other software where there's a big difference between when it's on your computer as your own versus online in the cloud.
Oh,
And often they have a similar name, but apparently they put together a whole new team of people to produce the cloud one, and they want to do things their own way, of course. So
Hey, any other comments regarding that report? Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda is number 9. And you submitted a report, Cindy. Would you like to run through that so that it's on the record, but it'll also be attached to the minutes?
There we go. Sorry. I met with Rebecca and we just had 3 issues that we discussed. One was getting a notice in the Sun regarding GA, encouraging people to come forward to be delegates and emphasizing that there was a fee waiver. We double checked and the board meetings were not posted for March and April, but they are on the website now. And then I'll be getting last month's May's to her following this meeting. And then finally, we tried to untangle the policies and procedures to be complete and reflect the correct numbering. And they seem to be a bit mixed up with this transition to the new website. So that one still requires some work to get sorted out, but we're aware of it and working on it.
Okay, and then there was one bylaw update that occurred out of the GA meeting or out of our annual meeting, and that needs to be by either the new secretary, Luba, or Cindy, since that occurred while you were there, is to see to it that approved bylaw amendment gets in the bylaws with all the proper, revised dates and all that stuff.
Okay. Luba, you and I can talk about that and get that.
yes.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, let's see. You and I corresponded a little bit, Dick. You haven't received any updates about the generosity team, where we are with that, or any other comments from the treasurer?
yeah, well, I emailed her again today, and just about half an hour ago, or less than I finally got an email from her, and she says that there hasn't been nothing more has come into the canvas, the generosity campaign in the last month. But I did get some final numbers, which I hadn't seen before. I knew roughly what they were, but she said the total raised through the pledge drive was $269,366, roughly $270,000. And I can send you the exact numbers here, but roughly $270,000 we got in pledges after the extra appeal. But that made a big difference. In the budget as it was passed, there was expectation that we would need to raise $57,000 through fundraising efforts. Well, because of the extra appeal on the pledge drive, which raised the pledge level, not up to last year, but still, which I think is more like 280,000, but still raised it quite a bit. The amount that is in the fundraising budget now is $40,803, which is about 41,000 that needs to be raised versus 57,000. So we made about $16,000 gain there, which is going to it's still going to be very tough, but it's certainly going to be, it will seem at least more feasible anyway.
Okay,
It's a little bit more in the ballpark.
would you put that down in,
Yeah, I'll send.
just a summary and then send that in and include Marilyn Johnson in that, and that'll become the treasurer's
Okay.
report that'll be fastened to the minutes.
You're right. I'll do that. Right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. The next item I had was team reports, which, I had down the name of Nancy on it. Just to see whether the social justice coordinating team was going to go anywhere after we passed the apartheid thing. Did they have plans? It seems I got the impression there was going to be, but without Nancy, we don't have any update on that unless someone else does. Okay, I'll defer that to the next.
I do want to mention that I noticed in that the GA at one point I saw mention of that campaign we signed on to for the no apartheid. So apparently a number of other congregations are actively doing it. I think that was probably Justice for Justice in the Middle East. I think they featured that.
Yeah, they did something pretty extensive, far more extensive with regard directly, I thought, to the Palestinian-Israeli situation. And I did also get out of it that's about 5 other congregations had adopted what we signed on to. So we're making a statement. I don't know how much import it'll have, but we are. So going on to number 11.2, I don't know whether there's any other team reports. I don't know of any. Does anybody know of any other team reports? Okay, under 12 unfinished business.
I have one little proposal too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, under new business.
Well, wait.
Sure. Tell me when's the right time.
Yeah,
Okay.
right now we're under 12 unfinished business, which was
Okay.
to discuss. Again, I had Nancy Avery down, but you may know something about this, Sue, if you've been working with this group. Lynn and you and Nancy, I guess, were involved. Is there anything that we need to be aware of that's upcoming or being thought of with regard to outside income?
I think Lynn could address that. She and Nancy are chairing it, I guess you would say. I just attend as the helpers. So
Okay.
Lynn, do you have any information on that?
Oh, she says she's in a quiet zone in Sandpoint.
Oh,
dear.
okay.
Well, if she comes back, if she gets back in, we can do that. Otherwise, we'll just, I'll put that on we will put this on the agenda for July. And then,
Tom, I got to put.
yeah, Jessica.
It's appropriate, but I will mention that I sent a list of my own suggestions to Nancy Avery, and she thanked me for my suggestions. And I've looked into some other possible alternative ways of raising money. So I'll let Nancy report if it becomes official, but it may be appropriate to mention that I've sent a list of additional ideas.
Yeah, let's that in the discussion item. We'll make sure that is in the draft minutes that you had done that. And I also had sent the subcommittee report on possible income enhancement that the board subcommittee, which was Doug Deaton and me. So they've got some suggestions that came both from Justin and from our subcommittee. I see your hand there, Sue. What?
I was at the first and only meeting that I'm aware of, and Lynn had written a little bit more that maybe you guys didn't see. But what we did was brainstorm and just throw out any ideas. Nobody got to say, oh, that's crazy or this and that. And they were written down, and there were some good thoughts there. I believe Cindy was there too. And so they're going to go from there, but we're waiting for our, or I am anyway, waiting for our cue from Lynn and Nancy. And with Nancy having been gone, maybe that's what we're waiting on.
Okay, well, we'll put that, we'll end up on the agenda. And then the other, it's continuing under unfinished business. It really is unfinished business because when the idea for various options of a appointed ex officio trustee, either voting or non-voting, came up, the board really didn't take any action. So we can't take any action at this point. I don't think we can or we should, but it would be something that I'd put down under things for the next board to consider looking at that as a suggestion. We can't direct the next board to do anything according to Robert's rules. We can only suggest items, give them a list of possibilities. So I'll put that down below. So then we are in there with new business, and the first item is the annual report was edited. I'm almost reluctant to use the word censored, but in fact it was. There was complete rewriting and retitling of one section and a substantial rewording, as you saw when I went through and compared them, and I showed the deletions and additions. What's done is done. I think maybe if we were to do anything at all, and others can respond, is to see to it that there's some guidelines set. Either there's a number of words that limit it to 2 pages, which there was nothing like that I was given to help the board with its report. And otherwise, maybe there's a responsibility for the next president, which would be Cindy, with the help of Nancy, to figure out what happens when the board agrees on a report and submits it, and there's somebody's wanting to edit it or change it. How do we deal with that? So I just think it's something that needs to be dealt with in the future. And but what
I agree with that, Tom. I think should be looked at. There were quite a few changes, and like you say, things left out, and I think it would help the next board and to guide them if there was a limit or anything. But I do feel strongly that there should be a conversation.
Any other comments? Well, that said, we could have a motion that would be from this board.
Can I say something else?
Yeah. It seems like we need to do something directive, but I'm not sure what.
I'm curious, and I would like to hear a discussion of this that no one else seems to, by no one speaking up, to question or think it's good for more guidance or anything. I'd just like to hear more from the rest of the board. It's not that important a thing. Question.
Well, do we know how it came to be edited?
That was
No.
my question, yes.
No, I don't know. All I can tell you is I submitted the board's report as approved by the board, and I didn't hear anything back from anybody. But when it was published, it was significantly edited and modified. I can't say anything else.
Oh, was that by Rebecca? Or-
I can't. Okay, two things. I don't know. Factually, I don't know. And also, one of our policies and procedures is that we have to be very, very careful about criticizing or intimidating staff people. So at this point, I'm just saying it happened, and I think that we should, if we do anything, we should pass a motion to try to clarify what the criteria is and how it will be handled in the future, which would be the next, the next annual meeting in 2026.
Well, personally, I don't feel that it's criticizing to ask for guidance for next year, that why. I don't feel it's criticizing, it's asking for further clarity and yeah, it felt very strange to me.
I think clarity is kind of the key word there, because the board was, or the report was submitted one way and it appeared another way. How did that happen?
Mhm.
Yeah, the board is written by one person. So if that person submits the report, then why would another person do some amendments or editing without discussing it with the person who wrote the report? That's my question.
Well,
Mhm.
let's be clear. I drafted a report. I sent the board a draft of it, and then we discussed it in a meeting and the board adopted the report. So even though I might have been the original author, it was a board report. Wasn't just me.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay? So to see what I'm getting is a consensus that for the future board report, which is usually authored in April in order to be put together during May, that there be some understanding arrived at with regard to the content of the report and how it is dealt with once submitted by the board.
And what do you need?
I was gonna say, I think you all made very good points. The thing was edited and we weren't informed. Why was that? I think I could add more, but I think all of you chimed in nicely.
can we ask for guidelines, and who can provide those guidelines for the report?
Would that be done by the president at this time or with the new board?
I think that clarification needs, it's been brought to the attention, obviously, anybody who could look at what our documents are, that there was an issue. And I think the next board and the next board president needs to deal with establishing some guidelines so that this doesn't happen again, that there's feedback, a request to edit it, a limitation on the number of words, or something, because what happened isn't acceptable. And not so much that we need to dwell on the past, but we need to figure out what we're going to do in the future so it doesn't happen again.
Do we want to?
Right.
Do we want to acknowledge or have a discussion with Rebecca about this year's report and the editing, or is that water under the bridge and we focus our attention just on the next year's report?
I understood the focusing on the future is more important.
That's my personal opinion. What's done is done. And there isn't anything we can do about it except to try to deal with how do we deal with this in the future.
Mhm. Mhm. And be very aware so it doesn't get past us next time.
Yeah. So can we I'm trying to think of how Marilyn Johnson's gonna handle this. Would it be suffice to say the board is concerned about the editing that occurred and will be very interested in making sure it doesn't happen in the future, and we have a clear understanding of how a board's report gets stated in the annual report?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's good.
Okay, and if you, referring to Marilyn, if you can put that last sentence or put it in some form that seems reasonable, then that would be part of the minutes, and we just don't need to have any further discussion.
Well, there's still the issue of the guidelines you mentioned. So someone should work up some guidelines in the future.
Well, I think that needs to be worked on by the next board, yeah.
Oh, next board, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay, good.
Jean Larson has joined us, and some time ago we lost Lynn because of the quiet zone wherever she is in Sandpoint. And she did enter some chat comments about that. The next thing,
Oh, I had my hand up.
Oh,
May I
yes.
say something?
yes, well,
Now we can see it.
we're going through items on the agenda. So the one we were talking about was the editing of the board's annual report. And then
Yes.
at the very bottom of our list, we have other items.
Yeah,
Oh, so I can't speak now?
and I have one too, yeah.
I'd like to go through the
Yeah,
items
okay.
that are on here, and
Okay,
then, so we get through the agenda that we had. The next item I had was whether the new officers just would have any comments, that they would like to make, or we all had those comments. I just wanted to make that opportunity available.
A very brief one from me. I'd just like to reiterate that I really will depend on the help and support of the board members going forward. I'm kind of a nervous new president, so I'll appreciate help from all of you.
Mhm.
I think you'll get a lot of help. Maybe, you'll need to help us define what it is. So we can work on that. Then the next thing in the agenda is recommended priorities for us to recommend to the next board. We can't direct the board to do anything, and we don't need to have a lot of discussion. It's just a matter of, are these topics that we should refer and suggest the new board consider? And the first one I had was review and renew the ministerial agreement. And the comment is that in the ministerial agreement itself, it says it will be reviewed every 3 years. And this coming fiscal year is the year it would be reviewed. So that's something I would suggest that we recommend that be something that the next board have on its list of things to do for the year.
That's a review.
Now, without discussing it in detail, because we don't have time to go into detail, is that a reasonable suggestion that we should have on the list for the next board?
Yes.
Was this a review of the ministers?
Yeah, the ministerial agreement.
Ministers agreement, okay.
Yeah. The next thing I suggest,
I just want to state the obvious that we put down what we just discussed, which is review the editing policies.
yeah, I have that.
We covered that just a minute ago, but
Yeah,
we're looking
yeah.
for a
and
list
I
of things
have-
to review.
Right, and I have that to be added on, actually, that's
Okay.
out there at the bottom. The next thing is we are way overdue with updating this 5-year strategic plan. It was, I think, drafted in around 2010 and updated in about 2017. It's supposed to be done every 5 years. So on the list that I'm suggesting we convey to the next board is that they get involved with our a 5-year plan, which might even involve an envisioning process. And that would be for the next board to decide how to go about the strategic plan, starting with what we have and working on something very similar, if not an expansion of it. So, is everybody comfortable with that being on the list that we would suggest for the next board?
Yep.
And then the
I'd
next,
like to take just a second.
Go ahead.
Lynn did type in the chat, if no one saw, that she is still here and she's listening.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's
okay. Okay, good. So yes, thank you. Thank you, Lynn. That's very strange. And anybody who sees a chat come in there, ring my bell because that's not something I'm watching.
Okay.
Thank you. The next item on there was reviewing the end statements. The end statement are to be reviewed periodically as needed and with some cooperation with the congregation, which suggests some kind of a congregational conversation. To my knowledge, they haven't been changed or updated for at least 4 or 5 years and maybe longer. The end statements appear at the beginning of our policy and procedures governance document. And as a policy governance form of government, we're supposed to have ends statements at the very beginning of our policies to guide the board. And they're kind of like goals, overall goals. So my suggestion is that those be looked at to see if we want to go about reviewing them. It could be combined with a visioning process and or a strategic five-year strategic plan update. So I'd like to have that on the suggested list for the next board to at least look at. Is everybody comfortable with that?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, and then the next one that was on my list is, we didn't do anything with the 7 principles when it was proposed to be in the, as part of our bylaws. That was voted down. And then there was some discussion of the 7 principles when the shared ministry team did a survey and presented a summary. There was some discussion. So do we want to recommend the next board look at whether there's anything we want to do with the 7 principles or not have that on our list for the next board? Of course, the board could, decide on their own, but what is our disposition with regard to recommending whether the board look at if there's anything to be done with the 7 principles?
I think in some earlier discussion, and I can't remember how we came to this, but in sort of like taking the temperature of the congregation, there was the feeling that it was about equal, that it was needed, it wasn't needed, that it would be more divisive, that it would be more clarifying. I'd be kind of inclined to wait until there's some clear direction from the congregation or an active effort to either retain the 7 principles or let them go or change them.
Yeah,
Yes.
I do remember, Cindy, that we decided to wait until there is some kind of initiative on the part of the members, not initiate, not to, not for the board to give any initiative, as far as I remember.
I would like to note also that the point of view of Todd was that he did not think it was appropriate to have this kind of thing in the bylaws. And so the real issue here may be not that we have it or not, but how do we present it? Maybe we post these as on the wall or something as guidelines that we from the past that we still honor or something like that, rather than something that's officially adopted as in the bylaws. I think there's
Yeah.
if we adopt them in what sense? I think that seems to be the issue right now.
Okay, so what is a consensus that we have it on the list for the next board to at least look at the issue? Not that we're saying they should do something, but they look at the issue. Is everybody comfortable with that?
I think looking at the issue, if there is a problem or if there is a request from the congregation.
I
Okay.
agree.
Mhm.
Who
I agree with that. what Luba said.
I
Okay,
agree with what Luba said.
All right, then it sounds like we won't have this on the list.
Mhm.
Okay, that goes off the list. Not that your board can't do it, but there won't be on our list to suggest that they deal with it. Then the next one is this whole issue of someone who pledges and then dies and they made an endowment request and what about fulfilling the pledge? I asked Karen Dorn Steele last Sunday whether she felt the issue was okay the way things are, that they have a way of managing it, and she felt that they did, and that we don't need to pursue that issue any further. So I offer that, but it's on the list. Do we want to do anything about it or just leave it as it is?
I think I'd leave it.
I agree.
Mhm.
I agree.
If it's
Okay.
working,
Yes,
if it's working, don't fix it.
yes.
There isn't clear direction about how to do it, but we seem to be making it do. Okay. Then there's been the final thing I have before we go to any comments from Gene, if they happen to be in this line, was there's always seems to be some kind of uh, a disagreement about how policy governance is supposed to work. Do we want to suggest to the next board that they have an issue about looking again, other than in the retreat, which typically is handled in September, and that's when typically a policy governance is addressed? Do we want to have a suggestion that they do something extraordinary other than what would take place in the usual September board retreat?
Well,
Comments?
Todd does the retreat. I think Todd has his thoughts on where, my impression, where maybe the board overstepped into an area that they shouldn't have done and whatever. I think if you guys feel you need clarity, which I think the board does, just mention it to Todd that you want to be sure to understand this clearly, and however he decides to present that, you can still scratch your head when he does it and say, I'm still not clear, you know, but I think it's an important part, very important to be educated in this, because it was an issue this last year with some.
Yeah, well, for those of you who remember the board retreat, we spoke a lot about policy governance. We had a lot of conversation. I deliberately presented some scenarios which I felt had been issues in the past, and we talked about them. And one of the responses I got back from Todd afterward was it was one of the best retreats that we had, and yet there was nonetheless conflicts during the year. Also, some of us had done research with UUA about what is policy governance and what is expected of the relationship between the staff. If you have a CEO, which we have, we have a CE and a policy board. And so there's stuff written about it, about policy governance, and maybe we just need to have, somebody needs to have a further explanation that gives a perspective that is a multi-point perspective. So does the board want to have it on the list of things to refer to as a suggestion to the next board?
I guess I don't feel it's a top priority.
Okay, that's one comment. Any other?
Did each of you feel comfortable with all the areas that the board worked in this last year? Did you feel that we did not get out of the parameters of policy governance, or were you clear?
I think there was ongoing conflict over email policy, which I think will be, no matter what we decide, it'll be an ongoing conflict.
Well, okay, right now the email policy is set unless the board wants to to change it. But that is really, if you look at the big picture of policy governance, the board making policy, the staff carrying out what the board policies are, referring such minutia as we get before us, either to a designated team or committee that's already established, or if it's a day-to-day operation, referring it to the operations manager and the operations team. I felt we did a pretty good job of juggling that, considering we had a limited number of teams to refer stuff to. We have more teams at the end of our year than we had at the beginning of the year. That's positive, but I felt we did a reasonable job in light of the resources we had available. You know, we could only ask so much of our staff. If we had 3 Rebeccas and a $200,000 budget to pay them, then we could ask the staff to do a whole bunch, but we can't ask the staff to do much more than they do. There's simply a limitation.
I think that the relationship within the church or any office, for example, cannot be without a conflict and discussion. And I think that Tom handled it well. And we managed to survive the year without a fight. There was diplomatic decisions. I think they should be diplomatic, of course. And sometimes concession is important. So that's my opinion.
And so,
my
Doug,
I kind of think that the censoring of the report is related to this, and I really think it would not hurt at all to keep to have it on the list as an item of concern.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
yeah, certainly if the boards, yeah. Yeah, well, and that's a point well taken. The board had a report, and the report, when it was published, was substantially edited and arguably censored. And that has to do with the relationship, as explained in the documents I read at UUA, of a policy board and the staff that's supposed to carry out board policy. So you're identifying a conflict that actually occurred.
Yeah.
Yeah. So should we keep it on the list or just consider it not an issue because we dealt with it, other than the specific issue of we need to figure out what the rules are with regard to the annual report going, how it's published and
So
what?
you call it a point of concern. How about questioning the editing? Just question is not expressing anything.
Well, I didn't mean to bring the discussion back to that question, Luba. I just think I'm just saying it ought to stay on the list. That's my
Okay.
opinion.
And I would rather have it's going to be on a list focused on any particular issues that come up. Otherwise, it gets too abstract. But like this editing or any other issues where it comes up is the staff overstepped their role, the board overstepped its role, or whatever. I think that's much more illuminating to focus on particular issues.
Tom, do you think that when we have our board retreat in September, the focus of it will be the policy governance model? Is that what we'll be doing?
Well, it always, of course, I've only been to 2 of them, but it seems to be pretty predominant. But one of the things that I've experienced in the past is we're given the CE, the chief executive's version of what policy governance is. And that discussion probably needs some illumination by board members going to that. All of us have been board members. The only new person here, totally new person, is Nancy, and she was a board member when we were under a different form of governance. But the board members need to go into that meeting with some background information and research on their own as to what their understanding of policy governance is.
Yeah.
So
I'd like to comment. too.
yeah,
I
go,
think-
go,
I
go
think-
ahead, Dick.
On the, we have a board retreat, I think it'd be much more appropriate to focus like on the fact that there isn't a strategic 5-year plan, and there was, what's our vision for the next few years and how we're going to go about that? Because it's probably, things have been changing so rapidly in the world, it's probably time to sit back and talk about these things and see if it leads anywhere.
Well, and our end state, yes, you know, you're right, in our end statements and how we go about actually reviewing the ministerial agreement. The last time that was done, I think Lynn might have been the president and even consulting with her about how that was handled. That might be useful as a past president's input. So there's lots of things that probably should take place in that retreat and not be dominated by a discussion of policy governance.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the board ought to try to set the agenda for that board retreat along with the minister.
Mhm.
So it seems like it ought to be. It seems like it automatically is it kind of included in the retreat topics that it will come up, but shouldn't dominate the retreat, as you're pointing out, Dick. There's lots of other important things we need to think about as a board for the next fiscal year.
We're ready to move on? Mhm.
Yeah, I'm, unless there's objection, I'm going to suggest that we not have that as a suggested item to forward to the next board.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Is there general consensus on that?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then the only other thing would be, the thing we discussed under unfinished business, which was to have the board look at the issue about whether they want to deal with an appointed trustee treasurer. And the general consensus from up above under unfinished business was that we would add that under this list of things. So we've dropped 7 principles, dropped the pledge endowment bequest issue having to do with the endowment team, and dropped the board role in policy governance. So we have left a review of the ministerial agreement, update of the strategic plan, review of the end statements, and a
Yeah,
a discussion of the issue of an appointed trustee treasurer. Those are the 4 items we'd be recommending.
I have my new business item might come underneath here.
Okay. Well, okay.
One quick thing about the list. Tom, do you see our financial issues, our shortfall, as being something that has been delegated to the fundraising group that Nancy heads and will be managed by them? Or is there a role for the board in that issue that it should be on our top list of concerns?
I think you make a good point. Certainly a policy issue to me is how does the church in its entirety deal with an continuing decline in our finances.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I think that would be, to me, a major part of a strategic 5-year plan is to look at the financial situation. What
Okay,
to do about it. Because
I
they
like-
sort of,
I like
they go
that.
together, that's a key thing.
Yeah.
But could I add my one little
Yeah.
thing? Okay. The other thing is, I don't know if you all know that the Zoom audience for the worship services is apparently gone now. Terry Anderson has stopped hosting those, and at least for the summer apparently. And there was a period where the Zoom just wasn't working it wasn't working at all, basically with the music and whatnot. And then when we tried to get back, and then we lost a lot of Zoom members there. So this affects, I think in the past there's been interest in spreading the church activity nationally even further as a possibility. But that simply doesn't work apparently unless you have a viable Zoom which it's always been fairly good for the speaker, but it's been very, very problematic over and over again for the music, and the music is really an important part of these services. So it seems to me we need to find a way to solve that. If you do that, maybe we can start to get back some of our membership, because we had maybe half dozen or a dozen people who would stay afterwards and have very interesting discussions about what went on the service or whatever came up. But that kind of melted away down to 2 or 3 when the music wasn't working, and they stopped doing the Zoom services, and they said, "Oh, just watch the live stream, then come back into the Zoom." That did seem to work. So I'm not sure if this is something for the ops team or what, but it does affect if we're trying to expand our our interactions and even membership nationally and internationally. If that's, are we abandoning that, or is that going to be something we want to work on to make work better?
I think you've got a good point. I didn't realize that had happened, so you're providing new information, but it seems like it should be, there'd be a policy matter of how aggressively or completely we are trying to continue to be international and national congregation or even membership. Do And I'm just not sure where to go with that, except that you're making a point with me that it should be on the list for the next year's board. What do other people think?
I don't think the board can do anything about that because it is a technical problem. By the way, last year I talked to Terry Anderson. For some reason, he said he got a word from Todd that he could talk to me because he talked to Rebecca and Rebecca couldn't explain anything to him, but I'm not a technician. So anyway, that he expressed concern that something is not working. I understood that it's not working on the part of being from different time zone and different providers for the internet. Zoom connection sometimes can be very tough. And Rebecca explained to me that everything was working okay here, and probably it's because of the providers over there where they are.
And
But
I don't think that's true.
no,
Because it's the only issue is with the music. Like there's like sometimes the singing would come through, but almost never would the piano come through. There wasn't a microphone there that was picking it up and feeding it into Zoom. And Zoom does have. I've been to other services by Zoom from other churches, and in some of those churches the music is fantastic. So our Zoom setup is not working, and that can be fixed, but it's technical in one sense, but it takes commitment and maybe more money, maybe I don't know, but it takes takes a commitment to actually make it work properly.
okay,
And if other churches can do it, so can we.
Do you mean that it's a technical problem that can be solved by our technician Todd?
Well, I don't think so, because if he could solve it, he probably would solve it. So I think we need an outside person to come in and do an independent assessment and try to figure out what's going on.
Well,
And that's, some people say, well, when he's there, it works better, but it's got to be something that works all the time. And maybe it's training of theirs, but my feeling is we need maybe a better system or a better way to run it. I don't know exactly what, and we probably need an outside assessment there.
Sue,
I think this is something the board should stay aware of. I do not think it's something the board should do anything with. I think it should be handled through the operations team. In my many talks with Rebecca, she will know she is very savvy with these sort of things, and this sometimes they're harder than others and what this is. But I would suggest that as is it Luba, you'll be attending those meetings. that you could even say, if the board wants you to say, you know, we heard about this, we're very concerned, can we be kept abreast of how it's being improved? But I do not think the board should do anything.
Yes.
I don't think anybody's suggesting the board gets down on their hands and knees and nuts and bolts about solving the problem.
Right.
The question is, does a board want to have on their list as a policy issue that
No.
that the issue be looked into and worked on?
Yeah, the ops team should do it.
Well,
But-
I don't know who does it.
Yeah,
Does the
but
board
they should,
wanted to get better? That's a policy.
they should be told that this is an interest of the board or priority or something
What do
like
you
that.
feel about this, Cindy, going to be the new president?
I agree that it is kind of getting into the, under the hood if we were to be involved.
Mhm.
So, being aware of it and directing an appropriate body to manage it and work to resolve it seems to me to be the best strategy.
Mhm.
And that would mean having it on our suggested list for the next board to do something about it, not to try to fix it themselves.
Yeah.
Require-
Yes.
Right, yeah, it's just,
And well, I heard from Todd, when he mentioned that there was a problem with the Zoom, he said that the people who were previously Zoomers, now they're streaming. And then that group does the Zoom between them, bypassing us.
well,
That's
see,
what is,
I mean,
that's what is happening.
but maybe people are zooming are streaming now because the Zoom failed on the music. That's why they're streaming, because the system is not working. But then you don't get the follow-up Zoom rooms. They're not coming into the Zoom room anymore, and you're missing all
Oh.
the interaction because
So
they're
they don't do follow-up Zoom after streaming?
well, in theory they could, but only a few of us. We were told, well, just stream because it's better on the music and everything, and then come back into the Zoom room. But when they did that, only about half the people came back to the Zoom room.
I see.
We're falling into the trap of talking in detail about this
Right.
policy board, and we shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
question is, do we put on the list for next year, the
Right.
board considers this enough of a priority or importance that somebody try to deal with it?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
But it is valid for us to try to understand the problem, though. We don't solve it. But we
Well-
need to, but we need to understand it.
In stating what the problem is, that we're losing people that we had before.
Hmm.
And we need to try to get that group back because they're part of our community.
Right.
Okay. All right, well, I will work on, you know, on phrasing something that I can put together a list that this board would refer to the next board in a way that it's a policy issue and not a nuts and bolts issue that we're gonna try to understand or even.
Hmm.
Okay, so now we're down to, well, we're down to member input. It's that, and Jean's the only member here, and I don't see a chat from Lynn. But Jean, what would you like to have address under member input?
Okay, I would like to talk to the editing situation of the annual report. I think the answer is very clear and could be voted on this moment, that the secretary or whoever formats a report from any board member or minister or whoever should not edit the text. And it's that simple and clear, and I don't think you need to beat around the bush anymore. It's an issue I've dealt with myself, to the extent that one of the aesthetics team's brochures, all the people that wrote things in the brochure were deleted when I asked for it to be reprinted. And I asked just for some copies to be printed, and here they come with all of those people's names deleted. And believe me, they got put back on there really quickly. And we shouldn't have to watch people that closely. So I would urge you to go ahead and just make it a policy that I'll just say secretary does not edit things that come from the board.
I think the next board is going to look into that, and we don't have any factual information about who did the editing. And that's something we discussed before you came on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you knew for sure who it was.
Nope.
No,
No, but that still doesn't negate what Jean is saying.
No,
Does it matter who did it? It was done. And, you know, I'm not gonna be on this next year, but it does, I would, you can ask for, it still very much needs to be addressed. I don't know if you guys want to go ahead and make some vote or whatever, but it should not have been done without being talked to the board president, who was the one who submitted it for the board. I feel strongly about that.
mhm.
well, I think we all, I think we all agree with that, but like we said early on, what's done is done. And we got to look forward.
Well, I don't agree with that. That report can be rewritten the way you submitted it. And I think that will make a point more than just saying, don't do this again. Say, go back and do this the right way right now.
Well, a suggestion has been made that this board jump into the matter of the editing and possibly even demand that the original board report be published, I guess. Is that, what is the board? I don't know whether I phrased that right, but what does the board feel about that suggestion? We would have to do something by motion if we're going to do that.
I don't think it is necessary unless there was something in the edited version that contradicted their original report.
I haven't heard that there was anything that contradicted it, but I did hear from Tom that there were things left out. Am I correct on that, Tom?
Well, yeah, let me, I don't know how much,
While you're looking at it, Tom, I'll comment.
yeah, go ahead.
In my opinion, the editing improved the report. The problem is not that, in my opinion. The problem is that the editing was done without consultation with
Yes.
the people with Tom. So, you know, Gene used the term beating around the bush. What I don't understand, as still the relative newcomer to this community, is why somebody doesn't just go and find out what happened and why.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Trying to do this in a committee conversation like this is to me inefficient and takes a lot of time of a lot of people. Whereas, you know, what the consensus I observe here tonight is that everybody's concerned about this shouldn't have been done and why was it done. So why not go find out why, and have a harmonious community discussion between somebody in the on the board and the people in the office. You know, I feel sure that Todd did it to bring the report in line with his ideas about policy governance. I may be wrong, but that's my opinion from having just a couple days ago reviewed the Tom's red and blue email to us pointing out what was changed and what was omitted. So to me, the community-like way to do this is for one of us to go and find out, you know, hey, what happened?
And I think that's a good solution, that we're not pointing any fingers. We just want to know what happened, and I think we'll get probably a pretty simple answer.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta have to keep in mind that Todd is on sabbatical until the end of July. That's why just,
You go to Rebecca then.
and we are supposedly, under our policy and procedures, not supposed to confront the staff with.
Then my suggestion would be, write an email to Todd, say this has come up. Well, how would he direct us for us to get some clarity on why this took place? We're not pointing fingers. It doesn't matter who did it. It's that it was done. That would be my suggestion.
And asking Rebecca what happened is not confrontation. It's a simple question that we all feel is appropriate.
I would be happy. I am going off the board, but I would feel very comfortable talking to Rebecca and
Yeah.
getting an answer.
Great idea.
Great idea. Yes, clarification on the part of the present board,
Mhm.
and that the next board will feel like we know some answers.
Okay, what we need in order that that this be a board expression is literally a directive that's in the form of a motion that we asked the question, why was the editing taken, why did the editing take place? Is that the simple question everybody's after?
Or is there any criteria for the report?
See, that gets into the issue for next year.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if
Okay.
this needs to be in the board minutes.
I see.
What's that, Dick?
I'm not sure if this needs to be in the board minutes. If we have a board member who's going to informally make an inquiry, that may be enough.
It's a question. It is not an inquiry. We're making more, this is very frustrating for me. I feel more is being made of this before it even needs to be. It's a question. Why were all these changes made? Can you tell me? The board is
That's what an
curious.
inquiry is a question.
Okay, I understand that, Dick.
Yeah.
But,
I didn't mean that
um,
different than a question.
It sounded more like, that sounded more like court talk.
No.
An inquiry.
Well,
I don't know.
the
But
same thing,
anyway,
yeah.
I would offer to do it. You guys
Okay.
tell me what to do.
Okay, okay.
Well, I think you know what to do, Sue, and I think I hear both you and Tom Dick saying that this doesn't need to be an official action on the part of the board.
Yeah.
That you can just go do this, and it doesn't need to be in the minutes or anything else.
Okay, that's
Okay.
about the solution.
But it's okay for me to say that the board discussed this at length and that they agreed that they would like me to find out. I offered and you said, yeah, go do it.
Yeah, the board is concerned. Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes sense for you to say, yeah, what so, which is
Because it's
the
true.
board is concerned.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel, Tom?
Well, I guess how I feel is that it isn't going to be as simple as asking a question. Because the obvious answer is, I didn't do it. And then where are you going to be?
I'm very innocent. I don't know.
I don't see how you can anticipate that, Tom.
Yeah.
All right.
I suspect Rebecca knows and can answer it. She saw yours. She saw what you put together to put in the paperwork. So, and if it's like that, if it's that Rebecca says, I know nothing about it, well, then that's her answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So without a vote, you're going as a representative of the board, that the board discussed this and it just simply wants some answers about why there was a significant editing. And you can take the document that I shared with all of you, which is it's got so much red on it, there's almost more red than there is black on it, which means deletions occurred.
And I can just come back to the next board meeting because I'm gonna miss being here.
Oh, right.
Like,
Sure
I
you
like
are.
this, this going too.
But, and you need to stress that this was a board report adopted by the board for inclusion in the annual report. And the board apparently, the board was questioning why it was so substantially edited and arguably censored.
Yeah,
Mm.
I hope it can be a helpful discussion between Rebecca and I, so the board can learn from this. The next board,
Mhm.
I think we should be finishing
Mhm.
this up now. I think we've clarified it.
Yeah. Yeah, so we are at 5:30, almost 5:40, which is about what we were saying we were going to be aiming at. So that is, there'll be a little bit of follow-up work here with me coming up with a list of stuff that I'll make sure are in the minutes. That's
Hey, Tom, I want to thank you. I'm sure everybody does. You've been a great
there's so
leader.
much, there's so
Yes.
much thread in there, it just drives me crazy.
You've been a great leader, so thank you for all your work.
Yes, 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 yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you, thank you.
Bravo.
Okay,
Same.
well, everybody, we're closing down at 5:40 and we'll look for some draft minutes to come out from Maryland in the next couple weeks.
Okay,
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
bye-bye.
bye.
Bye, everybody.